So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to this week's Energy Show. Now this week, we're talking about balcony solar, also known as plug-and-play solar or plug-in solar. It's a very compelling product. It's popular in Europe, especially in Germany. It's a simple, affordable, easy way to install small solar systems. So it's great for renters. For homeowners, I consider it a gateway drug to a much larger rooftop system. So typically, a balcony solar system is composed of a few standard solar panels hanging off apartment balconies. You can also mount a few solar panels in your driveway or in your backyard. The mounting is really important, so pay attention to that because you want to make sure that the panels are secure, they don't blow over or fall off a balcony. That would really suck. This concept initially started about 15 years ago when a crazy company called Akina Solar put a microinverter on the back of standard solar panels. And these products were actually in Lowe's about 17 years ago. The concept back then didn't take off because the components were basically too expensive to move through the retail channel. Batteries weren't available, and it just didn't make a lot of sense for DIY customers. But that's changed now. Most common now are balcony solar systems equipped with a small battery. And that allows one controller to have an inverter in it with a battery, and that could operate 3 or 4 solar panels. So the battery gives you backup power, which is something that people want. Not a ton of backup power, but enough to keep a refrigerator and other small appliances going. And it is also really, really useful so that you can time shift your energy use. Basically, you can power your home from the battery during the evening, and you charge that battery up during the day. So super useful. And these systems typically have a maximum size, a maximum output of about 1,200 watts. These typical systems have 3 or 4 solar panels plugged into a controller with a battery. And that controller is then connected to a standard outlet in your house. And it has to be plugged in from a cord. Now, you want to make sure when you hook these things up that the cord is secure and it's not damaged from sliding doors. So that there's one thing you got to be careful about. If you have an outlet that's installed outside, you plug it into an outdoor outlet, you're 100% cool. So balcony solar makes so much sense. What's the catch? Why isn't this ubiquitous like it's happening in Germany? Well, it's very simple. Because of bullshit utility opposition. Utilities claim to have a complete monopoly on anything that generates power in your house. They don't want to lose a single kilowatt hour to a competing technology like balcony solar. And then the way they look at it, every single kilowatt hour produced by balcony solar or plug-and-play solar is one less kilowatt hour that they want to sell to you and that they're going to charge you for. So really the opposition is your local utility. Now let's look at the energy produced by 3 400-watt balcony solar panels. Many systems in the U.S. are designed for 2 to 4 panels, and they max out at 1,200 watts, so you're not backfeeding too much power. And let's look at an example in San Jose, where you install these solar panels on a south-facing balcony. You tilt them at 30 degrees, which is kind of optimal for San Jose. And these 3 solar panels are going to produce about 1,680 kilowatt hours per year. The math is pretty good. We can kind of calculate based on the incident sunlight and the average amount of sun per hour per day, and the location, the orientation, things like that. They'll produce about 4.6 kilowatt hours per day. That's not a lot, but at the average rate of 45 cents a kilowatt hour here in San Jose, that's going to save you about $2 a day. Now, by the way, note that these systems are putting out about 4.6 kilowatt hours per day. The average home uses more like 33 kilowatt hours per day. So it's not going to make a huge dent for the average home, but for a renter on a budget, balcony solar makes a lot of sense. The average renter uses about 425 kilowatt hours per month. And, this balcony solar system can actually cut the electric costs for the average renter by 33%. That's pretty good. That's a big win because renters can install solar. They really are not allowed to put solar panels on the roof. It's just the way things are. They're renting. They're going to be in and out. It's an apartment building. There's a flat roof. There's a bunch of other people that are using that roof. So they're really their best option. And this is why it's taking off in so many places around the country. Their best option is balcony solar. On the other hand, if you wanted to generate all the energy you needed, let's say you've got a typical home, you'd need about 20 solar panels. That's going to generate about 1,000 kilowatt hours a month. That's a lot of balconies. It doesn't work on a balcony solar unless you have some bizarre kind of apartment where you've got enough balconies for all those solar panels. But what you need for home is a 20 panel rooftop solar system. That's why I call balcony solar kind of a gateway drug to rooftop solar. If you want to save real money on your home, you're going to need a bigger system. But if you're renting and you have a smaller electric bill, balcony solar makes a lot of sense, except utilities require an interconnection agreement for every generating source connected in a home, even one single solar panel. And, although the utility only charges you only $175 for the interconnection agreement, the actual interconnection costs are ridiculous. Here's why. To get that interconnection agreement approved, you need a $200 building permit from your local city. To get a building permit, you're going to need about $300 of engineering plans to show the building department that you've got this thing properly designed, even for one solar panel that's plugged into an outlet. To get that completed building permit signed off by the inspector, it's going to cost you and the inspector about $400. You're going to have to wait 2 to 4 hours for the inspector to show up, look at it, and that's a lot of time. Time is money. And to handle all the paperwork needed, you can figure it's another few $100s for the management of the permitting and the interconnection process and the accounting and writing the checks and everything else. So when you add it up, the costs to get just an interconnection agreement for one balcony solar panel are going to range from $1,000 to $3,000 depending on your city. And it's always going to take several months. You can't just plug the thing in. This process takes several months. Trust me, I've been doing it for 25 years. So the reality is that balcony solar has an almost undetectable effect on the electric grid in your neighborhood. Here's how balcony solar works if you plug that 1,200 watt system in to your home's electrical system. The first thing is, all the power from the balcony solar system is going to go into your circuit breaker panel. It's going to power the existing appliances, loads, lights, things you have plugged in around the house. Even when you think everything is off in your house, you're still using power, a surprising amount of power. Actually, when I kind of look at my house, the biggest power consumer is the cable box. The thing actually has got a fan and it's humming all the time. But you've got a modem. You've got things like vampire loads, little clocks plugged in, chargers, all kinds of stuff. You have bigger loads like your fridge, like your security system, and all kinds of things around your house. Your house is using, even if you think everything's off, 200 to 400 watts. That's why balcony solar systems are not exporting any significant energy to the grid ever. If you were to turn off every single circuit in your house at the circuit breaker panel and just leave that one circuit breaker on for your balcony solar system, the electrons in your balcony solar system, in those 3 solar panels, would go out to your neighbors on the local electric grid. Just imagine the photons hitting your solar panels are going to create electrons. Those electrons are going to go through your house wiring. They're going to go into the electrical panel. They're going to go up the utility pole near your house, and it's going to go to your neighbors. Very, very cool, very elegant, completely de minimis. You will be sending, with that 1,200 watt balcony solar system, about 200 watts, less than 200 watts to your neighbors. If you had 10 homes in your neighborhood that were each sending 200 watts around the grid, that would be a grand total of 2,000 watts to the grid. And according to some utilities, this would be an apocalyptic economic and electric grid disaster. 2,000 watts is the power consumed by a single lousy toaster oven. It would be physically impossible to overload the grid anyway with balcony solar. Even if every house in the neighborhood had balcony solar and was using 0 electricity at the time, you can't make a dent in the electric grid. The electric grid is made for much, much bigger amounts of power. So for safety reasons, an interconnection agreement demanded by the utility is absolutely not needed. Really, it's just an excuse by utilities to preserve their profits. And the cost of an interconnection agreement is actually way more than the cost of the balcony system solar itself. But there are some important safety issues related to balcony solar. So let's talk about that. These safety issues are legitimate. They're based on the Electrician's Bible, the National Electric Code, as well as widely accepted Underwriter Laboratories or UL standards. Underwriter Laboratories is the organization that makes the standards. They're also the ones that make the tests. They make a lot of money on it. They're strict, but it does improve safety. Balcony solar is specifically addressed in the UL 3700 standard and in much more detail in UL's 24-page white paper shown on the screen. So if you're really interested, you can take a look at this white paper. It's really good. So the UL white paper identifies three key issues related to balcony solar. First, overcurrent protection, also known as a short circuit. Because with balcony solar, there are now two potential sources of power on a single electrical circuit protected by a single electrical breaker. And that could theoretically, almost impossible, but theoretically, create an overload. And that overload is solvable now based on the findings in the UL standard when they're implemented. They're solvable now with a dedicated circuit for balcony solar. So eventually, every balcony solar system is likely to have a dedicated receptacle with the necessary short circuit protections. Now, the second concern raised by UL is the ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI compatibility. Now, if you need a GFCI and a dedicated circuit, which is likely if the outlet is outdoors in a wet environment, like in your bedroom, in your bathroom or your kitchen, you have to make sure that that GFCI circuit is compatible with balcony solar. So eventually, according to the standard, all the balcony solar systems will be compatible with GFCI circuits. And the third concern they have at UL is making sure that the plug for balcony solar is touch safe. This one I almost can't conceive of because every single system I've seen is compatible. Here's the first thing to realize. If you take that solar panel with an inverter connected to it and you put it in the sunlight, that inverter will not work if it's not sensing grid power. So every single inverter, people with solar know this, if there's no grid circuit, if there's no grid power, if there's a blackout, your inverter automatically turns off. And so balcony solar systems are the same way. The inverter in that balcony solar system will not be operating if it's not properly plugged into the wall. So the touch safe issue to me isn't that big a deal because the prongs would never be energized until the plug's almost all the way put in. But there is some concern to make sure that those prongs are set up in a certain way. And when these new balcony solar systems come out that are compatible with UL standard, they will be touch safe. So that's not a big concern. So the good news is that companies who are releasing balcony solar products are going to ensure that they are compatible with UL 3700. Maybe a little bit more complicated. You're going to need a separate, maybe a separate outlet, a special kind of plug, but everything will be compatible with the UL standard. And that's also going to be compatible with the legislation that is being passed in a lot of states. And we'll talk about that in a sec. So in the meantime, if you're looking at putting in a balcony solar system because these current standards aren't fully implemented yet, all you have to do is work with an electrician or another qualified person who really knows residential electricity to ensure that your balcony solar system is installed safely. So there's no easy federal solution to the interconnection barriers that utilities are putting in place to stop balcony solar. We need state-by-state legislation. Utah was the first state to eliminate utility interconnection paperwork. That's why, that's that extra few $1,000s that you got to pay to jump through all the hoops that utilities are requiring for a de minimis amount of power going back to the grid. So this law in Utah was the first one that was passed, and it also requires the UL safety standard. So in Utah, you can buy and simply plug in a 120-volt balcony solar system as long as it's compatible with these new UL standards. Now, Maine, Virginia, Colorado, and Maryland have passed similar legislation. And 30 other states have proposed legislation that's kind of winding its way through the state government. In California, SB 868 is progressing through the legislature. The bill is authored by Senator Scott Wiener and it's being sponsored by the Environmental Working Group. And here's a quote from Bernadette Del Chiaro, the Environmental Working Group Senior Vice President for California. She also was the Executive Director for CALSA for many years. Here's what Bernadette says about it. These balcony solar systems are simple, practical, and proven. They give people the ability to plug into clean energy savings immediately. I can't emphasize this enough. You can just plug in. You don't have to deal with all the utility below it. So in conclusion, balcony solar is here to stay. The technology works, people are buying it, and there's new standards that are coming out. If you're interested, and it's a kind of a cool thing to play around with, buy a balcony solar system from a reputable company and pay careful attention to the installation instructions. Follow all appropriate safety rules. Things like making sure that the cord from the panels to the outlet is routed safely, and you're not going to cut into that cord when you close like a sliding door out of your balcony. Make sure your panels are securely fastened to your balcony. If you prop them up in your driveway, make sure we call it ballasting, to make sure that a wind doesn't blow them over. And make your own decisions about notifying your friendly local utility. Don't worry, you won't collapse the utility grid and have like a blackout that they had in Spain. You won't crash the grid if you plug your balcony solar system in. And when you do want a lot more power, buy more balcony solar systems, fill your backyard with them, or think about getting quotes for a rooftop solar and battery system from your local solar installer. That's all the time we have on this week's Energy Show. Thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. And if you miss any of today's show, you can always go to our website at energyshow.biz and listen to the podcasts.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's Energy Show.